Hi folks, Brian Oswald here with Oswald Financial Group. We're excited to bring you the second video series of our ACE Speaker Series. This video will focus on the insights and the key steps to living an epic retirement. Now we'll hand it over to Mitch Anthony to help you learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you who have attended today on this session on the epic retirement. I want to share my screen with you and share some thoughts with you about how your retirement plan and approach and perspective can be the epic retirement. And let me get the proper view here. Here we go. So what do I mean by the epic retirement? I mean living the best phase of your life yet. And I'm sorry to tell you that what we've been sold as a retirement life in the past hasn't really done the trick. I have a little different perspective on retirement than you may have ever heard before. So I want you to brace yourself. You might hear some things you haven't heard before, some things that might challenge you, some things that might make you rethink your plan. So all these thoughts I'm sharing with you are based on my book called The New Retire Mentality, which is now in its 5th edition. And I got to tell you, to be quite frank, when I first wrote this book almost 20 years ago, a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind, because I basically came out and said that retirement no longer fit the times that we live in, the proposition of retirement. And if you study the history of retirement, you'll find that it's not very old. The concept, as we know it today, sort of institutionalized retirement, was first invented in 1885 by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in Germany, who determined that if you were in the government and were 70 years of age, you had to take this disability pension and retire. A couple interesting facts. One, von Bismarck himself at the time of this legislation was 76 years old. So apparently he was grandfathered in. The other thing that might interest you is that the average German worker in 1885 lived to the ripe old age of 46. Think about that. A retirement, when it was invented, the retirement age was set 24 years past your life expectancy. If we move that fast forward into our world today, that would put our retirement age at 109. So you can see, even from a chronology point of view or life expectancy point of view, it's just not, it doesn't fit. It doesn't work the way it used to work, because we live longer now. And a lot of you are entering a phase of life. If you retire at 62 or 65, you've got 30, 35 more years left. What are you going to do with that time? That's the big question here as I coach you through the epic retirement. Now, whenever we talk about retirement, the first thing people think about is money. I speak to audiences all around the world, and I often ask, when I say the term retirement planning, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And they say to me, money. Well, of course, because that's the only context you've probably ever discussed or had discussed with you around retirement is, do I have enough money? But I would like to contend here today that retirement, first and foremost, is a cognitive health issue. Not just a financial issue, but a cognitive health issue. So how are you going to address these following issues? Number one, a study on short-term memory showed that in your first year of retirement, you can expect a 30% decline in short-term memory. Another study on continuing work for at least 1 year, that if you continue to work 1 year longer than you originally planned, you're going to add 11% to your lifespan. Another study that I thought was one of the most fascinating I've ever seen was out of Yale, and it was on your view of aging, your attitude toward aging. If you have a positive view of aging, you will add 7.5 good years to your life. Think of that. A positive view of aging. You know what I'm talking about here. People that, as they age, they get negative and pessimistic, and they're like, oh, I'm getting old. I can't do this. I can't do that. And they feel like they're irrelevant and they don't matter anymore because they're graying and maturing. That attitude doesn't help us live better. So we can add 7.5 good years by having a positive view of aging. And then in the Alzheimer Dementia Institute has found that one of the leading factors that cause people to prevent the progression of those two disease states, and now we're talking about lifestyle factors in here, not DNA, not genetic factors, was maintaining intellectual challenge in your life. So when we walk away from intellectual challenge, we're not necessarily going to find that in a crossword puzzle or a Ken puzzle, right? And so that decision right there alone is what causes a lot of people to rethink their retirement plans, maybe continue to work part-time or continue to take on challenges in their life. So retirement it impacts us not just economically, but it impacts us in terms of cognitive health and health in general, and in many other ways that we'll discuss here. We've been sold a retirement ideal that is all play and no work. But the fact of the matter is that there's a diminishing law of returns on leisure. That's right, a diminishing law of returns. When all you have to do is play all day, the play isn't as fun anymore. There's a balance here, and I'm going to talk about this here in a few moments about what that balance is. But I'm quoting to you now from a RAND study on the great unretirement trend and the three major findings of that study. And the first was one of the reasons people went back to work part-time or got more engaged in volunteering or mentoring or something like that is because they found that the thing that they wanted, maybe it was golf, maybe it was tennis, maybe it was pickleball, I don't know. But that when that's all they had to do, there was a diminishing law of returns on it. Number two, a life of total ease is not the ultimate retirement goal. I'm reminded of the words of Shakespeare, who said, "Leisure is a beautiful garment for a day, but a horrible choice for permanent attire." People that have nothing to do but ease often find themselves bored. And I had this conversation with a Mayo Clinic gerontological researcher who told me, he said, "Mitch, you're right on with this thought." And he said, "I can prove to you that a life of total ease is 2 steps removed from a life of total disease." And I said, "Please explain that progression to me." He said, "Well, it's pretty easy." He said, "First of all, like you said, people get bored when they have nothing serious to do, nothing meaningful, no meaningful pursuit in their life." And he said, "It's not long after they get bored that they get pessimistic." And he said, once they get pessimistic, it begins this downward spiral in terms of their health, both psychologically and physiologically. The third finding in the RAND study was that it may take 3 to 4 attempts to get it right. That this is no longer jumping off a cliff and hoping we have the right colored parachute. This is about an experiment in life. This is an experimental stage of life. So don't expect that you're going to come up with a plan and have it all figured out right away. You're going to experiment. You're going to cycle in and out of different types of lifestyles before you figure out the perfect balance for you. So don't worry that you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. You might have dreams in your mind. You might have hopes. You might have concerns, but this is an experiment for everyone. So in the past, in approaching retirement, it was really a question of enough. In the past, we asked, do I have enough money to retire? Or have I had enough with my job, my corporation, my industry, whatever it is I do? Now we're adding another question, and that is, will you have enough to do? 35 years in retirement is a long time. And will you have enough to do to satisfy you is the question, not just enough to do. When I hear people say, well, I'm keeping busy, I don't know how I ever worked, I'm keeping busy, I always ask, busy doing what? Right? It's like the old saying, bees get praised and mosquitoes get swatted. Being busy isn't the issue here. It's being busy doing things that are fulfilling to you. So let me give you my definition of retirement because it's going to differ from what you've heard in the past. I define retirement this way. Number one, it's an artificial finish line that has been imposed upon our life. Somebody out there told us that when we reach this age, we're done. Says who? Isn't it my decision to decide when I want to go into the cheap seats and watch the game rather than be in the race? Isn't it my decision to choose my pace and choose my place? This retirement is a social construct, like I mentioned earlier, that is out of touch with our times. I've already given you the short history lesson I previewed with that. So keep this in mind. It's an artificial finish line. And by the way, let me share one other thought. I've studied retirement policy around the world, governmentally, institutionally, and culturally. And I can tell you that the chief cornerstone of all retirement policy is ageism. That's right, ageism. What do I mean by that? I mean, they're telling us that when we reach this age, this is what we ought to do. That is clearly ageism. Why? Because all people are not equal at the same age. Think of someone that you know that's in their 80s and acts like they're in their 50s. Do you know someone like that? I'll bet you do. I do, my father. Think of somebody you know that's in their 40s and acts like they're 90. Do you know someone like that? I do too. What are we saying? It's not the number, it's the attitude. Age is a chronological marker, but old is an attitudinal marker. Okay? And so having age doesn't necessarily make you old. Old is it's an attitude and a perspective that one adopts. So that's by the way, the engage at any age is the E in the epic retirement. Don't let them tell you what you can and can't do on the basis of your age. You make that decision for yourself. The P in epic retirement is about purposeful living. The old idea was you retired and then you died. You know, when retirement was folded out into the United States culture in the 1930s, the retirement age was 62 and the average American worker lived to be 63. It was literally a one-year bridge. That's the old thought. But today, our focus is on aging successfully. That's what we want to do. Have you read the Blue Zone studies? They've studied pockets of populations around the world that age exceptionally well. And they found that there are definite definable factors that cause people to age successfully. One of those is being connected with people that you care about and that care about you, people that energize you and are energized by you. One of those studies was about remaining active in productive activities as long as you possibly can. Read the Blue Zone studies. The focus today is not on retiring, sitting back and reclining. It's on aging successfully. I have a friend named Marie who was a missionary in Cambodia. And she was forced to retire by her church denomination at the age of 66. And she told me she went back to her home in Alberta and she was deeply depressed because she had built an orphanage for children and she had built a widow's home for all the widows of the killing fields. And somebody else was supposed to step into that and take care of it. And she was home for a year. And she decided on her 67th birthday, her family was there, her 4 children, her 12 grandchildren. She stood up and she made an announcement. And she said, I want all of you to know I'm taking all my retirement funds. I'm taking everything. I'm selling everything I have. And I'm moving back to Cambodia. And they're going to bury me in the graveyard with the widows, near the widow's home. I'm going to live out my life there. And she did that. And by the way, just a cute little side note to this. She said after that party, she went to the grocery store and on the music system in the store, the song that was playing when she walked in was This Is My Life, Leave Me Alone by Billy Joel. I always thought that was a cute little sidebar. Let me tell you something. I just got an email from Marie yesterday. She's now 87 years old and she's still going strong. And she's now running 3 orphans' homes, 2 widows' homes, and a school at 87 years old. So it's about purposeful living. You do what you know is best for you, not what others tell you you ought to do. You do what you know is best for you. And that means living with purpose. I've always told people the epic retirement is when you have enough purpose to wake up in the morning and enough money to sleep at night. But don't think for a minute that just having the money is going to be enough. Money will help you fund a purpose, but it will not help you find a purpose. Now, let me talk about integration. This is the I in the epic retirement. What we need to do is we need to find our own personal balance. And somebody else can't do this for you. You have to figure this out for yourself because we're all wired a little bit differently. But that balance is between vacation and vocation. We've already talked about the fact that a life of nothing but leisure is not going to satisfy. So what we need is vacation and vocation. And so the vocation is when we have something to do every week that is meaningful, that is contributory. We've been sold on this idea that living a life of consumption and playing and eating and drinking and traveling and doing this and that life of consumption is going to satisfy us. It's not. It's having the balance between consumption and contribution. We all need to be contributors some way, somehow, with our abilities, our gifts, our insights, our perspectives. So finding this balance is important. I'll never forget having a conversation with a fellow who was an engineer for 35 years and he'd retired. And he told me when he first retired, it was the happiest day of his life. He'd been looking forward to it for 35 years because all he had to do was get up every day and golf. Six weeks later, I talked to the same man and I said, how's the retirement journey going? 6 weeks later, and he said, there's one thing they never told me. I said, what's that? He said, the reason my golf was so much fun was because it was my catharsis from my work. He said, now that I don't have my work, golf has become my work. It's not as fun anymore. And when I'm 5 over par after 2 holes, I've ruined my day at work. I thought that was a brilliant insight, that play is a catharsis from work. In other words, vacation draws its meaning from vocation. And then when you're on vacation, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm on vacation, after a while, I start getting itchy and going, I got to get back to work. I got to do something. So the two need each other to be meaningful. Vacation needs vocation, and vocation often needs a vacation. Now, I've already talked about the leisure life, but what I want to say to you is I think the leisure life is really the leisure lie, that doing nothing but playing actually leads us down the wrong path. And what I found with a lot of people is that it causes them to feel like they're aimless, they're without purpose, that they're not needed anywhere. I hear this from so many people. So what I want you to do is think about this idea of leisure as being the catharsis from the serious, meaningful contributions you're making in your life. And then you'll find that balance, that perfect integration. Now, I want to talk about work a little bit because work need not be a 4-letter word. Here's my definition of work. Work is an engagement that brings value to others and it brings meaning to you. Now, I want you to think about that. I didn't say anything about money there. It's an engagement that brings value to others and meaning to you. That could be volunteer work. That could be part-time work. It doesn't necessarily have to be taxing work, but just doing something where you know you're making a meaningful contribution. That's work defined. Now, let me try a phrase on for size. Once a person reaches the age of 65, they should no longer be involved in engagements that bring value to others and meaning to themselves. That rings rather hollow, doesn't it? Of course it does, because age has nothing to do with it. So that's something to noodle on, to think about, is what is it that I do, or what is it that I can do that brings value to others and brings meaning to me? So the old perspective was, we're never going to work again. We're going to retire and that's it. We're going to put the boots away. But the new perspective is, we're going to explore the life benefits of work. There are so many. For example, I read a column by a New York Times columnist here recently who talked about the fact that because of the COVID situation, he came to the realization that all his friends, his social circle, they were weekday friends. He didn't have any weekend friends. In other words, his social circle was limited to his work. I see this with a lot of people who retire, that they don't have a social circle outside of their work. Well, there's a social benefit that some people derive from their work. There's also the contributory benefit, knowing your abilities are being used. There's also the using your brain, right? You use it or you lose it. We talked about the Alzheimer's study about you have to continue to maintain intellectual challenge in your life. There's the sense of relevance and sense of identity. I live in a town that has many doctors, and when I talk to doctors who've retired, many suffer from the loss of identity because every day they were contributing, they were looked up to, people relied heavily upon their expertise, even though it was taxing. A lot of them, because it was taxing, a lot of them couldn't wait to retire, but then after they retired, they had this sense of identity loss. So it's important to explore the lifestyle benefits and the lifestyle motivations of your work. What do you derive from your work other than a paycheck that's meaningful to you? That's the new perspective. And then finally, the C in epic retirement has to do with the vitamin C's of successful aging. I've been studying the life expectancy and successful aging for the last 30 some years. And I want to share with you what we found. And they all these findings happen to start with the letter C. So I couldn't help myself, had to call them the vitamin C's of successful aging. First, and I mentioned this earlier, connectivity. Staying connected to the people that love you, the people you love, the people that are energized by you, the people that you energize, staying connected to those people. That's important. What do we do in America? Well, a lot of people pack up and move 1,000 miles away where they know no one, and they even hate their accent. We're supposed to stay connected. And by the way, I've been to some of these retirement villages and found that in some of these villages, 70% of the people within 5 years move back home because they miss that connectivity. So it's important. Challenge. I've already talked about intellectual challenge. I also want to talk about physical challenge. It's important to challenge yourself physically. Don't let aches and pains become your excuse for not challenging your body. Let me talk to you for a moment here about the corporeal cognitive spark. What they found, we've always thought, well, your brain can energize your body. That's true. But your body can also energize your brain. By challenging yourself physically, it sharpens your cognitive functions. It's called the corporeal cognitive spark. Keep that in mind. Keep challenging yourself physically. There's a reason when you go to the health club these days, you see a lot of octogenarians in there working out because they figured this out. Vitamin C number 3 is curiosity. As soon as you lose your curiosity, you start going backward. And this is something I've found about people that age successfully. They're people that are lifetime learners. They always want to learn new things. Don't be that person who is inflexible in your attitude, who doesn't have elasticity in your attitude, who's not willing to look at new things, try new things, experiment with new things, learn about things. If you keep curiosity in front of you, that childlike curiosity, it helps you to age successfully. Creativity is a vitamin C of successful aging. And creativity is, it could be music, it could be writing, it could be poetry, it could be, there's 1,000 things it could be. But I remember talking to an artist who was in her 90s, and she said something really powerful. She said, you know, when you're an artist, she said, you never see the same seascape 2 days in a row. You're looking for the subtle shifts, the subtle nuances that you can capture. So that creative mindset keeps the eye sharp and it keeps the mind sharp. And this lady, by the way, was extremely articulate. And another thing she said that might interest you is that every week she went and had lunch with, as she put it, girls at least 40 to 50 years younger than me. She kept her creative edge, her curiosity, and her intellectual challenge that way. And then finally, charity, a charitable mindset, wanting to give to others, wanting to do something for others. I received an email here just a few months ago that was quite moving for me. As an author, this is one of the best things that could ever happen. And this man said he was retired at 55. He bought a place in the Cayman Islands. He bought a place in Door County, Wisconsin. He had 3 homes. He was living the dream, he said. After a year, he sat down with his financial advisor, and his advisor said to him, Matt, he said, how's retirement going? And Matt said, suddenly, out of nowhere, a tear came down his cheek, and he realized he felt completely aimless in life. He felt completely useless. His advisor handed him my book, and he read the book. And in the book, I talk about having purpose in your life and being a contributor to society. And he said he started thinking about where could I contribute? And he realized that the area he was really concerned about was people coming out of prison and reassimilating into culture, finding a job, settling down, getting a home, just reassimilating into society and being a productive citizen. And he said he's now spending 2 to 3 days a week working with people in that situation. And he said his life is filled with meaning again. So this is what I'm talking about, folks. It's all about what can you do in your life to be a contributor. The epic retirement is about finding that personal balance that's right for you and and living a life that is filled with purpose each and every day. Thank you for your time, and I hope your thinking around retirement has been challenged today.